The tech creator Graham Linehan has threatened to take legal action against an Edinburgh Fringe venue which axed his stand-up show due to his views on gender. This is the Leith Arches had said it was not aware, I mean, some of the language in this is disturbing. It was not aware that a speaker lined up to perform at an edgy comedy night alongside other controversial acts was Mr. Linehan, who become well known over recent years for taking an outspoken stance on trans rights. The venue said some of its customers had been rightly outraged that it was to provide a platform to the writer and that his presence would violate our space. Earlier, Graham Linehan spoke to Talk TV Breakfast about the decision.
Well, it was announced in the morning, and I was quite surprised they announced it because it's always a risk to announce me appearing at something, and it was cancelled within a couple of hours, maybe. You know, I mean, you do get used to this type of thing after a while. It's never pretty, it never makes you feel good, but you know, the only good thing about it is that it's drawing more attention to the fact that, you know, essentially a group of highly ideological cultists have taken over institutions across society.
Yeah. He had been billed as a surprise famous cancelled comedian, but the venue cancelled the show after learning that this term referred to him. Interesting, I think it's Andrew Doyle that's putting on the shows. And I would guess, I mean, I don't want to speak for Andrew, I know him a little bit, but I'd imagine Andrew's got the same view as Graham Linehan, right? And he's not been... This is just a peculiar time. Luke Stephen, the comedian, joins us on this. How you doing, Luke?
I'm very well, Ian. Very well. How are you?
All right. I mean, I shouldn't any longer be surprised by this, but I mean, what I find fascinating is always the, you know, some of our customers didn't like this. Well, it was a sold-out gig for a start. Yeah. So I would guess that more customers were OK with it than not OK with it. Would that be fair?
Yeah, I would suggest all their customers were absolutely fine with it. They didn't advertise Graham on the show initially as they knew it would sell out, as Comedy Unleashed does. It does very well here in London at Backyard Comedy. So they just went ahead with it. They knew it would sell. They knew it would do well. And a few people realised who it was. And then they complained. And Leith Arches, I guess, which seems to be a big thing now, they just don't want the pushback. They just think... it's strange that such a minority of people have obtained such power that they are able to cancel shows. I mean, this didn't normally people would complain about comedy would be like the Christian right, and shows would still go ahead. Like that would be Stuart Lee's The Jerry Springer Opera.
Correct.
Protested every night. But I think with that, you know, and also the Book of Mormon as well. When that first came to London. True. What did Mormons do? They started putting Mormon posters in the tube, and they went and flied the Mormon religion at the show. So no threat of violence. But I think the thing with this issue is there is a legit threat of violence if this goes ahead. They won't just protest outside peacefully. They will attack people. They can put it on their social media. They can gain some clout. And Leith Arches probably just thought, do you know what? We don't need this.
It's not worth it. But then the way they chose to phrase it, Luke, was as if it was kind of, you know, they talked about these views don't represent our community. I mean, this is a building. I don't know quite what the building's community is, but nonetheless, that's the way they chose to phrase it. Do you think that they're clearly also jumping on the bandwagon of virtue on this, right?
Absolutely. Well, it's just an easy pass. It's like, do we really need do we need the threat of violence? Do we need a sense of bad publicity? Do we want other acts potentially pulling out and performing with us in the future because we had Graham Linehan here? They could have looked at all of those possibilities and thought, you know what, let's just cancel him. There's going to be no threat of violence if we cancel Comedy Unleashed. They'll just do a bit of pushback. They'll complain about it. But ultimately, we're OK. And it's just not good enough. I mean, I think the numbers are becoming fewer now at the Edinburgh Fringe over the last 5-6 years. Less people are going. We had this with Jerry Sadowitz at the Pleasance last year, and it's going to continue to happen. I just think I think comedians are going to stop going. They're going to, if you're going to cancel people, you're not going to let us perform, then we'll do it. And also, I'm amazed that other comedians aren't speaking out about this as well, because this affects our industry. This affects us. This is what we do. We go on stage, we attempt to make people laugh, and that's what it's about. But for other comedians to be going, fantastic.
Well, I mean, Linehan on his interview on Talk TV this morning, he also talked about, you know, women in sport and, you know, the whole gender issue around sport. And he said, you know, so you've got Sharon Davis and people like that who are getting the most incredible, disgraceful abuse on social, you know, death threats and threats of sexual violence, which, you know, you can't really, you know, bearing in mind the people that are who are so disgusted by someone's position that they decide that the best way to address offence is to be as offensive as you possibly can by threatening to rape somebody or something similar to. You think, well, hang on, where are you then on this moral crusade? That doesn't make any sense. But the point that Graham was making this morning on Talk TV, Luke, was just quickly was. You know, why doesn't a Gary Lineker character come out on the side of Sharon Davis and say, look, you know, blah, 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 it won't solve the problem, but it would help the problem. And I think you're making the same point about fellow comics, is that there's sort of a lot of people very quiet on this.
No, absolutely. Well, I saw Sharon Davis on the brilliant podcast Trigonometry, where she spoke about how the difference in reduced testosterone levels doesn't really make a difference in high-impact sports like sprinting and powerlifting, because of the Q angle that men and women have are very different, because of women, the shape of their hips, bone density, lung capacity. So it was very interesting. You know, Sharon Davis knows what she's talking about on this, and it's bizarre that she's getting this backlash. But you hear the backlash she gets, and Gary Lineker can watch that and go, I don't need that backlash. I'm not going to bother.
I know, and it's curious.
I think if you had 2 or 3 others do it, then more would get on board and feel braver about doing it. But it's just like, you know, I don't feel this is my issue. I'm not sure this affects me. I think Sharon Davis is coming out of it because Sharon Davis is a woman, and it's, you know, women's sports have been I don't want to say decimated, but it's people are transitioning that way that are, you know, there was a Canadian powerlifter that broke the powerlifting record.
Yeah, I saw this.
I think it was something like she beat the nearest competitor by something over 200 kilograms or something like that, something insane. And then, of course, you've got Leah Thomas.
And then went on to complain that women aren't very good at weightlifting.
Yeah,
which was kind of like you couldn't really write that. You know, Linehan couldn't have written that. What I find interesting, though, Luke, I mean, I've watched a lot of comedy. I'm a big fan of comedy and going to comedy clubs and the like. I have lost count of the variety of material that I've seen people write comedy about. Everything from the Holocaust to Madeleine McCann. In various ways, often through the prism of irony or, you know, stimulating a very dark subject in order to get out another point, etc. None of it to be deliberately offensive. But if somebody wanted to construct an argument that we cancel stuff based on what is offensive, then there's a big, long list of stuff there you'd have to get through.
Well, exactly. And again, it's that thing as well that offence can only be taken. It's not given, do you know what I mean? And the thing is as well, when you talk about when people tackle those difficult subjects like the Holocaust, or if they want to make a joke about Madeleine McCann and whatnot, it's like bad thoughts are funny because we all have them, but they're unexpressed. And that's what makes it work. If you just go up there and say a bunch of wonderful things that we all agree with, there's no comedy in that. You have to come at it from a different angle. And you do that by playing a parody of yourself, by playing the worst person in the room and saying awful thoughts that we shouldn't have, but can think from time to time. That's where you get the laugh. Absolutely. So the idea that comedy's got a risk of offending people, well, it's, you know...
So what? Crazy times. Luke, thank you. Luke Stephen, comedian with some common sense on that one as well. Let's talk